Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to this amazing conversation and very timely, important conversation about childcare, investing in childcare, workforce development strategy. For folks in the back, come up, join us, grab a seat. We have an amazing panel, and I'm so excited to dig into this. Just to set the stage a little bit, as anyone with children knows, anyone who employs anyone with children knows, there is no workforce without childcare. Everything that we are talking about at this conference can only happen if we have a strong and affordable childcare system in place in our city. It's critical for working families, it's a cornerstone of economic stability, and yet we have significant gaps that remain that need to be closed. There are more than 500,000 children in New York City under the age of 5, and yet we only have one licensed childcare seat for about every 2 children under the age of 5. So we have a huge issue when it comes to supply. 80% of families cannot afford childcare for one child based on federal affordability standards. And we know that the city of New York is losing money as a result of our gaps in the childcare system. In 2022 alone, the city is estimated to have lost $23 billion in economic activity from parents who either left the workforce or downshifted their careers to take care of their children. So today the conversation is going to be about solutions, about things that all of us can do in our practice to address these problems. We're going to be talking about how to strengthen the childcare workforce in our city, how to connect more families with the care that they need, and how to engage employers in this conversation so that they can be part of the solution as well. We have an incredible lineup of policymakers and practitioners with us. In the interest of time, we're going to jump right in. Everybody's headshot and title is up there on the wall. And I want to start with Deputy Mayor Ana Almanzar, Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiatives in the Mayor's Office. So I tried to set the stage there a little bit in terms of kind of the state of childcare in New York City right now. From your seat at City Hall, how do you view the major challenges in the childcare sector, and what is the city doing right now to address them?
Well, good morning. Thank you, Grace, and thanks everyone for staying with us this morning. Before I give my answer, I want to just give a round of applause to the wonderful and unique Jennifer Jones-Austin, who opened up this morning. She's in the back. She won't know that we just mentioned her name, but it's just important to acknowledge her and the great work that she has done from the true cost of living to working on the racial commission in the city and in helping guiding the work that we must do to make the city more equitable for our New Yorkers. In terms of childcare, the sort of point of discussion today, and I see so many good friends in the audience. I always do this and give a shout out to everyone, but our friends from New York City Kids Rise and making sure that our children have access to college savings as they come into kindergarten. Thanks for being here. I see Julie from Sunset, and I saw Lucy from helping us figure out our after-school program. Now to the answer. There are 2 challenges that we see and that we are working in partnership with the City Council and Chairperson Joseph, who's here with us today. There are affordability, and Grace, you mentioned that, and access. When it comes to affordability, we have been working hand in hand with Council. We made a $100 million investment this year alone to increase access to childcare. We also work at the state level advocating for the increase in the threshold of those families who make $100,000, just above $100,000 with a family of 4, to be able to access child care subsidies. We also work together with different partners across the city to make sure that we brought the cost of child care down for families who have access to a subsidy for a family who are making $60,000 a year. Family of 4, they used to pay $55 a week for childcare, and now that has been reduced to less than $5 a week. But we know that the work is not done in terms of affordability. As you mentioned, we have grown, in spite of the numbers of the 500,000 children that live in the city and the percentage that doesn't have access to childcare, we have grown the system to now have 150,000 children accessing childcare throughout the city. many of them working, and you mentioned how childcare is sort of the lung of workforce, not only for those parents who are able to leave their kids at a safe and affordable, accessible childcare center, but also for mostly women of color who work in childcare, specifically those who own small businesses across the city, providing childcare and early child education from the residents, and building another set of the economy through residential-based early childhood education centers. So that's on the affordability issue, and we continuously work with the state and the federal government advocating to make sure that the benefits that New York City families should have access to are increased, given that we understand that childcare costs really rises the cost of living, as the Jennifer just also was mentioned before, for New Yorkers as well. And for accessibility, we are working with the council this year, work to develop an outreach and enrollment campaign to make sure that those families who might be eligible for childcare and have not applied yet, that we engage with them to bring them to the table and start those conversations. We do work closely with the council in partnership to make sure that whatever we're doing in City Hall is what is needed in the community. One of the things that we've learned as I took this job about 18 months ago was that we do have lots of seats. Many of them are taken, others are not. And we, together with the council, are looking at specific neighborhoods and looking at the needs of those neighborhoods and making the match between what is needed and where those seats are. Mm-hmm. And working with New York City Public Schools and a great Deputy Chancellor Hawkins there, to help us look at those maps and make sure that we make that match, because otherwise those seats will be empty and families still in need of having a child without childcare.
Thank you. I mean, it is one of the great mysteries, I think, for people who are not on the front lines of this issue, is that we have families in New York City who are eligible for subsidized care that are not getting it. Either they may not be aware that they're eligible for it. We've created far too many bureaucratic hurdles that they need to jump over in order to access that care. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of those challenges.
One quick point, Grace. We built the My City portal in trying to alleviate that challenge. And through that, we have about 60,000 families access the application childcare through My City portal just in 1 year, since 2023. And last year, we had a record number of applicants throughout the entire system. In 2019, we had 19,000 applicants. This year, we have 43,000 applicants that applied on time by the deadline. We made offers to every single one of those 43,000 families, plus about 10,300 families who applied after the deadline. So the total number of offers was about 53,300 to make sure that those families have had a seat that will accommodate their needs.
Which is amazing. That's amazing progress. Thank you for your work on that. I want to go to City Councilwoman Rita Joseph. You've been a leader on child care issues and how we can tackle these challenges. Tell us about the policy conversations happening in the City Council right now and the work that is being done to advance the 10-point plan that was put forward earlier this year to support child care.
Well, good morning. Thank you, everyone. I'm Councilmember Joseph, also the chair on the Education Committee in the council. This was important. And when we talk about families going to work, being able to go to school, this is part of the plan. So in the FY25 budget, if we plan to stabilize early childhood, this sector, we had to come up with a plan. I found that we were doing this in the dark with our eyes closed this whole time and trying to figure it out without a plan. So when the council was passing the last budget, we were able to come up with a 10-point plan, which is so important, right? Expanding access was important to 3K. Improving family outreach. So we had 13,000 empty seats. Why weren't these seats being filled? How come the families didn't know about it? Is it language barriers? Is it outreach? And we said we were going to create a plan where we would be everywhere. The hair salon, the churches, the shelters, wherever we can find families that are in need, we're going to be reaching out to them. We also had to grow our special education seats. That was one plan. If you heard my fight all budget season, it's because we had over 700 students at home with special needs who are not in school. That was unacceptable to me. and not even receiving their mandated services. I've been yelling about that from day one, and we were able this year to do that. Over 450 students was able to find a seat. Did we reach our goal? No, but it's a work in progress, and we're gonna continue to work to get there. I want that number to be at 0. I'm very ambitious. They know that. Gregory knows that too. Provide free extended hours. I was an educator myself before I became a council member, 22 years. I don't remember one time that I finished teaching at 2:20 and I was at my child's site at 2:25. If we want to meet the needs of families, we have to meet them where they are. Families get out of work at 6 o'clock. We want to be able to extend that. So that was one of the missions for the council in funding that pilot programs. This year we're on our second. Super excited about that. And supporting our undocumented students. Promise NYC, we expanded that to 25 million. That's 1,000 students that are now sitting in those seats. Maintaining the mayor's office on childcare, and that's what DM talked about, making sure we have accessibility. Helping providers, right, thrive, and I know Gregory loves that part, making sure our providers thrive. And we wanted to create a childcare advisory group, right? We can't do this work in silo. We cannot do this work in partnership. We want to work with the folks that are doing this work day in and day out. As I'm fighting on policies, they're the ones meeting the needs of the children. And we meet bi-weekly. So today, after this, we have a meeting. We've been meeting bi-weekly, asking the tough questions with the data, strengthening city agency support. When I came in, early childhood in 2022, was a disaster, and I'm gonna say that. And 2 years later, we're on a path of making sure by the time I leave this seat that we've closed the gaps, we've fixed the sector, and we're able to make sure we maintain it. Because this is, as you mentioned, and I said that in another conference, we've lost $23 billion because families were not able to go to work. Someone, of course, it's the women that's gonna stay home to take care of that child. When the decision come down, it's always the women. So we want to make sure we continue to thrive in that area. So that's the 10-point plan, the roadmap for early childhood that we created in partnership.
Thank you. Hopefully you'll have some things from this panel discussion to report back at the meeting later today.
Yes.
And it's not, there's the economic impact on the city. There's also the population shifts that are happening in the city where we are losing families with young children who are citing the high cost of housing and the high cost of childcare as key to their decision to leave the city. We're seeing declining, now stabilizing a bit, but overall declining public school enrollment. So a shift, I think childcare and the high cost of childcare and access is a key to all of that. Lauren Melodia, I want to bring you in, the Director of Economic and Fiscal Policy at the Center for New York City Affairs at the New School. You've done a great deal of work looking at the economic challenges of the system as it exists right now. And this is what I think is hard for some people to wrap their heads around, right? Families are paying more than they can afford for care, and yet child care providers are stretched thin trying to pay their employees who are doing the child care work, and child care providers are among the lowest paid employees in any sector in the city. So talk to us about the system. Why is it not working? And what does the path forward look like?
Sure. Does this work? Okay, great. Hi. Yeah, so, I mean, I think the challenge we have is that we have a system that is built with private markets. And, you know, you can say that markets work, like supply and demand work for certain goods and services, but I think it's been demonstrated here in the US and really everywhere in the world that it doesn't really make sense for childcare. I mean, you think about the fact that there's a lot of care work that happens outside of the market. People do care in their homes with their loved ones, family and friends, that they are not compensated for. And so that's the starting point for a lot of people understanding what the cost of childcare should be. I can choose to do it instead of going to work if my family has enough resources to support me doing that, but it's not valued. It doesn't have a dollar amount value to it. So then when you go out into the market and try and find it, there's like downward pressure on what people understand they should pay for it. And it's a necessity to get people to work, which means that, you know, if it's fully on you to pay for it in the private market, then you have to be making more at your job, meaning that the person taking care of your children, you know, has to be making less. That's why we have, you know, the child care assistance program to provide subsidized care for families who can't cover the cost. But again, that system is also built on this private market idea, valuing what, you know, my hourly rate should be based on what a family could pay for it, which is never enough. And so again, there's like federal, state, and city policy that continues to put downward pressure on the price of wages, to the point that, you know, we have childcare workers being some of the lowest paid people in the economy. I did a study at our center looking at the take-home pay of people who run daycares out of their home, family child care providers. They are small business owners or independent contractors, which means that they don't have any wage protections. They earn whatever's left at the end of the day. And so it's with them that you can really see how broken this market system is. We estimate that, you know, if you take their business expenses into consideration in 2021, the latest available data we had when we did the study, family child care providers in New York City were earning $10.61 per hour, which was, you know, $5 less than the minimum wage or almost $5 less than the minimum wage at the time. So you see there, like, the market system doesn't work, and that's why we have other goods and services in our society that are just publicly provisioned, you know, and I think that that's one of the directions we want to see here. If markets aren't going to work, if it's going to make it so that people can't afford to work in the system, and then we don't have it as infrastructure, then we need to think about it just being something that's publicly available, valued differently, because, you know, it doesn't have these market forces kind of being imposed on it.
Thank you. Dona Anderson, the Executive Director of New York Early Childhood Professional Development Institute. Given the low pay for people who work in the sector overall, how can the workforce development community help recruit and train more people to go into early childhood development and early childhood support and education, given those headwinds?
Thanks, Grace. You know, I was thinking about this again this morning, and, you know, as we were, sitting in a room full of people who are workforce developers, our childcare workforce are they're the first workforce developers. They are developing the future workforce. And so as we think about this, you know, this is all part of that same continuum of how we help to grow children. I mean, really, these folks who are in home-based settings, in center-based settings, in preschools, in public schools, you know, they are really the brain architects. You know, they're really the ones who are putting into place doing this very sophisticated, complicated work of growing the brains of our future workforce. So I think, you know, and to Lauren's point, you know, we're working in this broken market. And so when we think about that sort of, you know, the circles of, you know, a broken economic market where people pay too much and aren't paid enough, and in workforce development, I think that there's an interesting opportunity to think about how workforce development programs can address that. And I think when we're specifically talking about early childhood education and childcare,
taking a look at this and the barriers that are in place, what steps can be taken, should be taken to reduce the costs and regulatory barriers that really make it hard to open a child care center in New York City? And just as a brief aside, you know, we know we have them, but we know that there are many neighborhoods and parts of the city that are known as childcare deserts, where people can't easily access childcare. And I've talked to parents who have two commutes. They commute first with their child to a childcare center outside of their neighborhood, and then they have a second commute to their job, and then have to do that again at the end of the day. So even when we have some childcare centers that have capacity, they're not always in the right places where they're needed.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. First and foremost, what a tough act to follow. I'm thrilled and honored to be on a panel with such amazing, brilliant professionals and public servants who've dedicated their lives to making the city more equitable. The second thing I want to say is, you know, I would also be remiss if I didn't shout out some friends who are also in the room. Building Skills, David Mead, who did a great job this morning, is right in the back. Thrilled to work closely with him every day. Of course, Greg Morris of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition, and many, many others, many other members, including Green City Force. I know they're on a different panel somewhere. So just to tee this up a little bit, you're probably wondering, why is the Real Estate Board of New York on a panel about childcare? Great question. You know, I don't say this a lot, but I started my career actually as a daycare teacher. My first job out of college, I was a daycare teacher, and actually that person works with Dona very closely, actually at that training center, so I know firsthand what it's like when you have brilliant educators who teach you about the importance of that work and who empower children to be their best selves. That is what inspired my love for being in this space. That person actually used to let me out of work a little bit early and accommodate my shifts as an assistant teacher so I could go get work experience in the council, et cetera. So I would be remiss if I did not point that out. On the supply issue, that's exactly right. I mean, REBNY is proud to be part of this coalition called Better Childcare NYC, of which Building Skills, New York City Employment Training Coalition, Five Borough Institute, and so many others are members. And the whole concept is that we do have a problem with families being able to find childcare centers near where they live, work, and play, right? We've all talked about this here today. It's a problem across the city, and there are easy things that we can do to fix it. So we've joined together across sectors, right? Real estate, labor, business, workforce development groups, CBOs, daycare providers, to really push for the barriers that need to be removed to build more seats. So we have a 5-point plan to do just that, and it's something that both the city and state can do together. Been thrilled to work with Deputy Mayor Almanzar and her colleagues, and of course, thanks to the leadership of Councilmember Joseph and so many others. You know, once again, we are on that path, but the city has a property tax credit right now that is designed to help those CBOs find spaces in their communities that they can afford, build out those older spaces, and make them safe for children, right? Those little tiny seats, those HVAC systems, those water temperatures that have to be just right. That does cost money, and the city actually will help do that. However, you know, time goes on, the needs of the city change, and we're all here to make things better. So we have found that it is not working, it's not keeping up with the cost of the market. So just to give you an example, a daycare provider who was on the ground in Bedford-Stuyvesant was actually looking for space recently, and she talked about how her lease that was being raised to keep up with the cost of the market, and the current child care credit was 3 times less than what they was being asked for in the market. So to give you an example, in a child care desert today, you get $15 a square foot across the board if you are looking to claim this credit. Her lease alone what they were being asked for renewal was $135 a square foot, right? And that's not unique to daycare providers. That's happening across the city, no matter how they're funded. They can't find the space. But we know that that's not what the city intended to do. That's not what the council intended to do. And there are those high priority zip codes that folks are looking at, right? So we have a plan, revenue neutral, doesn't cost the city more money to do it, but to just make some adjustments in the way the credit is allocated so that childcare providers, more childcare providers in those CBOs on the ground can actually claim that credit they're applying for. And you, as the workers on the ground, you actually know that it's serving the people who are most intended, the people who are training our next workforce, right? That needs state action from Albany. So we're working collectively with the city and the council and many partners to make sure that change gets done next year. And then the other 4 changes are things that actually we've all talked about today. So the first is, fast track for permitting for childcare permits. There are so many different permits needed to open and build a childcare center. So for instance, you can go to FDNY, you have to go to DOB, you have to go to, I can't even think, it's like alphabet soup. I'm so sorry.
Department of Health.
Department of Health. You have to go to the Department of Sanitation. And if you're a small provider especially, that's really hard to navigate, right? So why not consolidate that into a fast track so people know where to go and how to get there and everyone knows how to build it out? The second thing is right now, this is the kind of space that is prime space for a childcare center. And you can't actually do that through the city right now. The city allows you to do it through Article 47 of the health law. There's a waiver process to actually provide for that. But it's so complicated of a process where a lot of providers often get ping-ponged around between those agencies. They don't know where to go. And so if you want to open up a child care center, it's going to take months and months and months and months for you to do it. An estimate we got from another provider was an additional 6 months and thousands of dollars in cost, right? And that cost is going to be passed on to parents and make it even harder. For those who don't know, on the real estate side, the second floor is sometimes the cheapest space to lease. I don't know why. I think the Civic Hall is a great space. Love it. It's bright. It's beautiful. But it's not always the case. So if we were to make it easier for providers to lease that space, imagine the number of childcare seats you could actually unlock in every neighborhood closer to home, right? There's also the last 2 plans. I'll just keep it really brief. I'm sorry, Grace, but I'm sorry, everybody else. But there's a ability to there's the fast track for permitting. There's the streamlining of the permitting process, just generally taking a look at that and making it more easier for people to navigate. It can be confusing for everybody. If you right now were to go to your child's school and ask them what it would take, it's not always that easy to navigate because of all the different agencies. Last but not least, on the subject of extended hours, that's totally right. We know firsthand that the way the system is not set up right now does not cater to the needs of working families across industries, right? It's not just a issue for CBOs or retail workers. This is something that impacts everybody, whether you are in real estate or in tech or a deli owner or you're driving the subway. Whatever you do, you need that flexibility. But centers have to be able to actually stay open to do that, right? So we are also taking a comprehensive look at all the regulations on the books that make it harder for centers to stay open. So for instance, you look at, right now, a home-based provider is treated the same way as a center-based provider, which makes sense. But if you're a center-based provider, do you really need to build a shower for after-school care? We don't know, right? But that's going to add cost, and once again, that's all going to be passed on to you as a family. So we're working collectively to take a look at that. And I'm sorry I'm being so inarticulate. I guess it's a complicated issue, and it's one that takes all of us. But what I'm trying to say here is all 5 of these changes are easy to do. They require collaboration from everybody, and it requires the input even from providers to say this is a real thing we're working with. None of these changes cost the city a dime. And we can get this done, and we can get this done next year and start putting us on a better path to achieve the changes that everyone here is talking about if we push for that change. Grace, did I cover that question well, or did we?
No, that was perfect.
Okay.
That was perfect. Thank you, Maya. Thank you. I want to make sure we have lots of time and room for questions from the audience. People can raise their hands the old-fashioned way or submit a question through the Slido app. I, of course, have more questions, but I see a hand in the audience, so let's pull some audience members in.
What about childcare to support education and training opportunities? Many of the lowest income families, oftentimes to get to that next better paying job or that better quality job, need advanced skills training. A lot of the childcare resources we have been talking about don't actually cover that, for some of the reasons that you said, but also because it's not seen as necessary. So we oftentimes get grant money to try to cover childcare and stuff like that, but it never goes far enough. How can we start thinking about those solutions? Because we can talk about people going back to work, but if working doesn't pay, what we really need to be talking about is socioeconomic mobility. So how can we use childcare to facilitate that so we can get to family sustaining, so these folks can get to family sustaining wages and jobs?
Excellent question. Thank you so much for putting that on the table. And is that hard? Are we modeling for that? Like when we are looking at sort of the economic hit that the city is taking from families that are leaving the workforce or downshifting, is there a way to sort of also take into account people who might be foregoing educational opportunities or training that would help them down the road?
I mean, I'm sure there's a way to estimate that. I don't think it was included in the economic impact study that was done by EDC. But, I mean, I think that some of the bills that Gregory mentioned are a short-term way to get to some of what you're talking about. If people have presumptive eligibility, if there's no minimum earnings requirement, what was the other one? Decoupling. Then if you are looking to upskill and but you already make some money or you're presumed eligible because you qualify for other benefits, then it would give you access to these vouchers for childcare assistance while you're doing training. It's not enough. I think obviously what we need is a universal system that's easy to access for everybody. But before we get there, if we could get Hochul to sign these 3 bills, I think it would open up a lot of barriers that people specifically who are in workforce training programs face. And I know that I think another one of the things that has been a real need that's been highlighted for years is the need for wraparound services at workforce development organizations, and you guys don't get funding that's flexible enough to really be able to do that. So I think that, certainly that's another thing that we should make sure is, an ask of the state and city budget process.
Can I jump in here too? I'll just add to that. I hope I was alluding to it earlier, but I think we're all also aware that child care as an investment in workforce training covers multiple tracks, right? By investing in child care, to your point, exactly that, we are helping people go to their jobs and go back to work. And I think one of the things we've looked at through the Better Child Care NYC Coalition and why New York City Employment and Training Coalition is part of that is precisely because that would also help build employment opportunities for people who are retrofitting these spaces, who are making sure they're up to code, who are making sure their kids are, our kids are in a space that's appropriate, right? That the space itself is suitable for a daycare center and that they're not somewhere that isn't. So I also think it's important to take the step back, and when we think about helping get to training opportunities or how to support you all to push for some of these changes that also give you those opportunities on the ground to get your foot in the door and get to higher paying jobs, because that's important, right? We've also heard that there are a lot of people who, if they're doing overnight work, they just need a safe place to leave their kid. How are you gonna do those things if you're training to be a home health care aide, for example, right? How are you gonna do those things? How are you gonna be an EMT if you can't figure out where to leave your kid? That's the main question. So I think that's the other, as I said, other side of this that I would encourage people to think about and push for as part of these in addition to everything else, think about these easy changes that'll help you get to where you want to go, because that's why ETC is part of this coalition.
Yeah, and just from a immediate practical perspective, there are some eligibility categories for childcare assistance that are available for workforce training. So this may be also a question of our sectors collaborating a little better, either making sure when a workforce program is running that you guys know if your participants are eligible for childcare assistance, and then if you find out they're not, maybe connecting with us and we do some joint advocacy to make sure that they are. Because it gets a little complex with what are the definitions of eligible workforce programs, but it's not an entirely excluded category. So for getting a voucher, for enrolling in a community-based organization, and then also for Head Start and for pre-K, families where there's not work requirements, those families are eligible if they're in a workforce program.
Question. I'm going to grab one from Slido and then out to you. And I think I'm going to direct this to the deputy mayor. Are there services available to assist parents who are navigating or trying to navigate the My City app to apply for a child care voucher, which I think speaks to kind of, even with the advancements that the city has made, which are so important to make it easier, it's still quite complicated.
And heads down is just almost incomprehensible. It's very challenging. It's many websites, many different forms that one has to follow and figure out how to fill out and complete. And you need a PhD on rocket science or something to do it. I couldn't do it even if I tried my best. With that, and because we understand that part of the 10-point plan that the chairperson spoke about is that outreach and enrollment campaign. And we are working with our public engagement unit at City Hall to bring training throughout the city to different providers so we can help individual families sit with their application and complete it in person with someone walking them through it. We're going to have a specific outreach and enrollment campaign throughout the city, starting, and I'm looking at Shahira, make sure that I have the dates right, in late January to the beginning of March, specifically for that window when the application process opens. So those families who are eligible and those who want to learn about whether they're eligible or not will have someone with them who can walk them through and help them understand what they're eligible for, how they can access it, and to complete that application that is so cumbersome, and that we are working internally in partnership with the council in figuring out what do we need to do, as Maya mentioned, to make sure that that map is a bit more straightforward than what it is now, that is quite cumbersome and way too complicated for a family to dedicate 3-4 hours to fill it out, to then find out that they didn't submit that 12-page stub correctly, but to have someone that actually can help them do that.
Also, just want to mention, at Daycare Council in New York, we are part of the Child Care Resource Center Consortium, along with Chinese American Planning Council, Committee for Hispanic Children and Families, and Child Support Development Corporation. All these organizations, as well as the consortium, have parent counselors who will help folks find the child care they need and go through and figure out their eligibility and all that. Multiple languages available, so there are people who are happy to help.
Thank you. Yep.
I just want to give a shout out to Kate Purcell at HRA, who's done the NYC Benefits project and now the NYC Benefits Child Care Enrollment Project, which Center for Family Life is part of. And so it's individual case management with people applying for child care vouchers to help them identify the provider and go through the enrollment process. And also we help the providers figure out a lot of their paperwork as well. And just a quick shout out, because folks mentioned it, we're also a provider of Promise NYC. That was a gift, an enormous help, but for the entire borough of Brooklyn, only 300 slots for undocumented children. But again, one-on-one help for people to enroll, and also for the providers to understand how to participate in the system. Both of those programs are wonderful.
And for
Thank
those who might not be aware, what Julia was making reference to was about the part of the 10-point plan that Council Member Joseph mentioned is the $25 million investment for our Promise NYC to increase the seats that were previously about 600 to be now 1,000. We have about, and we understand that the need is much larger than that, about 800 of those seats taken. And we look forward to this year's negotiation and see what we can do for our families who might not be eligible due to, and this is before January 2020, and God knows what they're going to do after that. But how can we help them access benefits to bring their child, since they are a vital part of the workforce, to a child care center? Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Hi. So I am a former educator and childcare provider as well. I work directly with job seekers. So I think that my question is going to be for Councilmember Joseph as well as Donna Anderson. I work now with job seekers who are immigrants and refugees who are trying to enter the childcare field as well as the education sector in general. And one of the biggest barriers that I've seen them face is certification and professional development. I think, you know, as you were saying, the voucher process is difficult. Just becoming a childcare provider is also difficult. And I can't imagine what that's like for people who are starting their own business to do that and getting all of those certifications. But I also know that within education in general, there are, I mean, I took like, I don't know, 10 tests or something to become a teacher. And so I'm curious what the city is thinking right now around getting more people into that field by, you know, removing or, you know, lessening the barrier of certification needs and professional development.
First and foremost, as a forever educator, never former, I'm gonna say, first and foremost, we need to make education sexy again, right? It's not a profession that's respected. Even when I ran for my office seat, I was still teaching because it was my commitment to New York City children. Showed up every day, I taught, and then I ran my campaign after that. But then we were heroes for 2 minutes. Then all of a sudden, we were looking out for our safety. We wanted to make sure we were going back to serve these very kids that I loved for 22 years. Everybody was like, oh my God, didn't they have enough time? Weren't they home? Weren't they doing remote? We were home, but we were organizing pantries. We were reaching out to families. We were making sure they knew where to pick up the gift cards because they were undocumented, because they trusted Miss Joseph to do that. So we gotta make that profession again, one that young people wanna come into. We can't blame educators for everything. There's certain policies, educators don't make policies. That's why today I'm on the other side, to make sure I represent the voices of educators like myself, who dedicated half of my life to New York City. But then when it was time to throw us under the bus, everybody was like, oh, throw them under the school bus. They don't deserve that, even for a contract. I remember working under the Bloomberg administration for 12 years with no contract. That means my profession is not respected, but yet I'm shaping the mind of the next generation of leaders who will be in my place to take care of me when I'm older. So we gotta make that messaging that education is a pathway. We have to create the pathway. The state has to work on removing some of the barriers when you wanna get certified a little quicker. I know they did that right now, because before you became tenure, if you wanna change your license, you would have to lose your tenure. That's something you knew. So the state now just changed that. If I wanted to change my license, I can still maintain my tenure. I wanted to become an ESL teacher because I saw a huge need. I lost my tenure and took on a new license to teach ESL students, because that's a shortage area across the city for the past 20 years. Nothing new. Nothing new in that field. So I lost my tenure, but I taught my kids up until the last day. People who come into this field, it's not for the money. When I started in 1999, educators were making $31,000 a year. $31,000. Who can live on that salary? But yet every day I put on my coat, I walked to school, and I gave my best to my kids. And I see them till today. They're 33, they're social workers, they're doctors, they're lawyers, and I have educators too, because I touched their lives. So we have to do better on how we treat educators. We treat everyone else so much better, but they forgot that it's an educator that made the doctor, the lawyer, the architect, the engineer. So we need to do better in order to retain that workforce for young people who want to come in. We need to start creating that pathway in high school. Not when you get to college, we're figuring it out. Let's do the pathway from high school, that pathway to career. When we talk about future ready, that should be one of the pathways for young people in this city. So education, we need to do a whole nother campaign around how sexy we need to make it, just like any other field. If I sing on stage, I'm sexy, I'm popular, same thing. I made that singer. If I was a music teacher, I taught that person. If I was an actor, I was that theater teacher that invested and poured into that student. So I want them to pour back into educators as well. And that's why we're leaving the field. We're leaving it in droves because we're tired being beat down, everything that goes wrong. The test scores are wrong, it's an educator. Did you provide proper professional development? Was it a drive-through professional development for 2 sessions and go figure it out? Did you provide around year support for educators? No. So as an educator who is forever educator for 22 years in the city, this is first and lived experience that I'm talking about. So this is what we need to do. Make it sexy again. And you'll have all your educators.
Yeah. So I want to actually flip your question a little bit, because I think where I always get a little bit nervous is we say, let's change the requirements. Let's make it easier. And those requirements are in place because this is sophisticated work, as you very well know. It requires a lot of knowledge and skills and competencies that should be respected. And if we change the requirements so that you're basically required to be a warm body to be in a teaching position, that's not what's good for kids, let alone good for our profession. So I think the pressure is absolutely on our training providers and the training sort of infrastructure and the professional preparation infrastructure. So we have to put, and coming from the City University of New York, we have to put pressure on our universities, the college opportunities. Are we making sure that those opportunities are available in other languages? We're working right now with the CUNY School for Professional Studies to be able to offer credit-bearing CDA coursework in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking providers, to offer them that same on-ramp into the field that other folks have. Are they offering coursework at the times when it needs to be made accessible? Is it early in the morning? Is it late in the afternoon? On weekends and evenings? Not your traditional 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's great for traditional students, but that's not who our workforce is. And so really putting pressure on those systems that do this preparation to make sure that it's accessible. And are there scholarship opportunities available so that people aren't coming out, that we're not wasting their time, so they're getting good advising about how to get from point A to point B. Are there scholarship opportunities so that they're doing it without graduating with any kind of debt, and opportunities to be able to advance within the field, to get their advanced degrees, to get their master's degrees, et cetera, and all the certification that's required. And also there's the financial part of it, but there's also the time investment. And so, this is something that we've been thinking about, and this is getting just a little bit into the weeds, but it really matters. The ability for a program to be able to get a substitute so that you can get release time to be able to go to class. Exactly to Maya's point earlier, Steve was able to give her release time.
Love that Steve Castar to this day.
Steve's able to give her release time so that she could go to class or get work experience. We don't, in New York right now, have an easy way or a feasible way to offer a substitute pool the way that the public schools have for our child care centers. So if you want to do that, you almost can't. And so we're working on that, but it's one of those are sort of devils in the details, but it matters when we're really talking about what's holding folks back. It's things like that.
Thank you so much. I'm getting the wind it down notice, but so to wrap, I just want to do like a quick rapid fire down the line. One of the questions that came in was, what is the best way for workforce development organizations to join in advocacy on this topic? And I want to put that to you all on this panel to real quick go down the line on that. But additionally, or in lieu of that, if you want to go bigger, what is one action that people can go out into the world, go back to their organization and take as a result of this conversation to move the needle on childcare in New York? Maya, I'm going to start with you.
Oh gosh, dangerous question for me and Greg. We have to pick just what, 1, 3? I don't know. Okay, so very quickly, like, look, it depends on what that means to you, right? How much time can you commit to advocacy? Advocacy is personal. This topic, as you've heard, as you all know, is so complicated. But I will just say, if you're part of a workforce development organization and you want to know what you can do, join Better Childcare NYC. Go to betterchildcare.nyc. You can look up the 5 platforms. You can see if your employer is part of that coalition. And if you want to know one action you can do, go back, tell your employer you want to be part of this coalition, because we are doing everything we can to work with all the folks on this panel. He's finally here to listen to me give him a shout out. Of course, Greg Morris, right at the back, Chief Workforce Development Officer, right? That's why they're part of this coalition, to help you get back to work. So the Steve Castor, my actual boss, Diana Carr, who was also my preschool teacher, which is embarrassing. So those folks of the world can help you get the shifts and the training you need to stay in this field, but also move your kids down a better path.
Okay, rapid fire. Gregory.
Yep. So quickly, there's a lot of things that are coming down the pike, and we don't even know what all of them are. It is scary to think of what's happening in this country. So I think all of us in movements to support low-income New Yorkers, to support struggling New Yorkers, we have to realize we're in it together. Our movements are connected. We may not all know each other, but we all are part of a movement together. And then just quick practical actions. The 3 bills I talked about, there's some actions you can take on them on EmpireStateChildcare.org. And we'll also be Daycare Council and Empire State Campaign for Childcare and several of these organizations heading up to Albany on January 28th for a mass rally and meetings with legislators.
Don't ask me to speak fast, because that's all I do. No, but one thing, if you're committed to this work and if you want to see the changes that you are aspiring to, come join city government. We have an office of, as the chairperson mentioned, Office of Childcare and Early Childhood Education at the mayor's office, that we have and have now baseline, thanks to the partnership with City Council, the executive director position that is open, and we are taking applications in, starting interviewing soon. So if you know anyone that is interested in this work, that is passionate about working with families and children, we know we can't do this alone. That's why we built the advisory group that the council members spoke about, in bringing community together, large providers, family and residence-based providers to the conversation. We meet quarterly, and we're looking for the leader of that office who will help us in that work. If you know anyone, just send them our way, and we'll welcome them to apply and have a conversation about the job.
Thank you. Moderator prerogative, I'm going to weigh in on this one briefly. I'm a former journalist myself. I think there's real power in storytelling. So I would encourage all of you to tell either your own stories about challenges with childcare in New York, stories of your colleagues on social media, write about them, share them within your workplace and within your organizations, because there is real momentum building, already some really huge, important investments, positive reforms that have been made at the city level, but there is still so much more that we need to do. And truly, we believe that the North Star we should all be headed for at the Five Borough Institute is a universal system where all families have access to affordable, high-quality care. But it will take all of our collective voices to move that and make that a reality.
Thank you. Reach out to your electeds, participate in hearings, submit testimony, put it on the record, come in to the council on your state, with your state elected as well. So we're here to support.
I don't have much to add. I think just the point is that there's like many different campaigns working on this very complicated issue. So Empire State Campaign, New Yorkers United for Childcare. I think that there's a real desire to bring the workforce development field into that work. I think it'll make all of those campaigns stronger, because we have this very fractured childcare system that supports a very fractured economy. And so I think that, yes, please come join those campaigns and let's figure out how the holes that you're seeing in the system can get elevated, because I think it's going to help us push for that universal system in the long run.
And just to follow up, reach out to any one of us. On the childcare side, we're the other side of the workforce development coin. So reach out if you have questions, if there are challenges, if there's something that just doesn't sit right, reach out. I am happy. I will pick up the telephone, that old-fashioned thing. I will actually pick it up and call and talk to you, or we'll set up a Zoom, or I'm happy to have a conversation. But we can really troubleshoot, and any of the folks up here are available to do the same.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to our incredible panel. Thank you. And to this great audience. So grateful to be with all of you today having this conversation.
Thank you so much to that panel. We love it.